Welcome to this explainer. You know, most people think they lose their money to the market itself, but actually, they lose it in the gap between what they thought investing was and what it actually is. And that gap is incredibly expensive, measured in both dollars and years. Today, we're going to break down the 8 stages of investing. We'll explore exactly what happens to your money and your mindset as your account grows.
So here is our roadmap for the journey. We'll be moving through the starting line, paying the learning tax, pattern recognition and capital, the compounding click, the invisible threshold, and finally, the first million.
All right, let's jump right into the very beginning, the starting line, levels 1 and 2, taking us from 0 to $1,000.
Picture this. It's a random Tuesday. You download an app and you deposit $20. It's a small amount, right? You figure you can afford to lose it. And honestly, you're absolutely right. But what you can't afford yet is the lesson that losing it is going to teach you. Because right now, the algorithmic market literally does not care that you exist. Your $20 is just sitting there.
But then you cross the $100 mark, and a subtle but massive internal shift happens. You transition from being someone with savings to someone who has positions. It's a totally new psychological identity. You've made actual decisions. You finally have skin in the game.
And then it happens. Your first real loss. Let's say it's $93. Objectively, that is just coffee and lunch money. It shouldn't matter, but man, it completely ruins your afternoon. The asset drops, you watch it live, but you absolutely refuse to sell. Why? Well, because selling makes that theoretical paper loss completely real. Holding onto it keeps it comfortably theoretical.
This is a classic cognitive trap. Step 1, you stubbornly hold on to that paper loss. Step 2, you sit there and watch that minor $93 dip snowball into a very real $340 actual loss. It perfectly maps out how unexamined emotions turn a tiny stumble into a painful fall. The platform isn't teaching you this, you're learning it the hard way.
Which brings us to our next stage, paying the learning tax. This is level 3, covering the $1,000 to $5,000 mark.
Now the emotional stakes have actual teeth, because you are officially no longer playing with house money. Enter the learning tax. This is the heavy tuition you pay to discover the massive difference between what you thought the markets would do and what they actually do. You pay this tax by trying out unproven strategies. Maybe you buy a dip. It works once or twice, which, by the way, is the worst thing that could happen because it builds false confidence. So you size up your positions right before the whole strategy spectacularly fails.
Suddenly, a 15% drawdown costs you a very real $450, and you learn a brutal truth. Building feels like forward motion, but rebuilding? That just feels like standing still with extra steps. Rebuilding your capital is psychologically exhausting compared to the momentum of building it the first time. But hey, at least you are finally building a data set of how you behave under pressure.
Moving on to pattern recognition and capital, level 4, where you are working with $5,000 to $25,000.
You've got real capital now. It requires calculated decisions, not just gut feelings. And because you survive those early beatdowns, you develop a superpower, the 48-hour delay. You start noticing your emotional triggers, and instead of panic selling the second things go red, you wait. That crucial buffer between the urge to panic and the actual decision is what saves you from total disaster.
You also start seeing the hidden mechanics of the game. Management fees? Yeah, they are no longer just rounding errors. If you have 20 grand growing at 8% over 20 years, a tiny difference between a 0.03% index fund and a 0.75% active fund literally eats up almost $18,000 in net returns. The math of small differences starts hitting hard.
Next up is an exciting one, the compounding click, level 5, crossing from 25,000 to 100 grand.
This is a massive psychological milestone. The math stops being theoretical, because your account is now making more money from market swings in a month than from your actual paycheck deposits. Your behavior dictates everything. Say the market drops 18%. One investor holds on. Another moves to cash to stop the bleeding. The consequence? The one in cash entirely misses the silent recovery. They end up totally underwater because, as we all know, market recoveries don't exactly send out announcements.
You're also figuring out the real geometry of investing, like tax efficiency. Got a $15,000 realized gain? Discovering that you can shift from ordinary income to long-term capital gains just by holding for 366 days instead of 364 is a real game changer. That single day of patience literally saves you $2,000 to $3,000 depending on your bracket. You're finally using the system to your advantage.
All right, let's cross the invisible threshold. This is level 6 and 7, taking us from $100,000 up to $500,000.
You are now in the top 10% of American investors by account size. The conversations change, and your knowledge is compounding just like your money. But serious decisions mean serious mistakes. You might build an incredibly complex, deeply researched argument for a single stock, only to make a $30,000 concentration error that erases 3 years of progress. It perfectly highlights this reality. The market does not care how sophisticated your reasoning was, it only cares about whether you were right.
And as you cross that $250,000 mark, the math gets staggering. Think about 40 grand. A basic 10% gain on a $400,000 account spits out $40,000. That is more than the median American household saves in an entire year. This mechanical reality quietly shifts your mindset. You stop thinking about aggressive accumulation and slide right into preservation mode. You're thinking in decades now.
And finally, we arrive at the first million. Level 8, $500,000 to $1 million.
You've hit the cultural myth, the millionaire. You've heard about it your whole life, but honestly, you get about 72 hours to celebrate before the mathematical reality kicks in. You undergo a categorical change here. You're definitely not a retail investor anymore. The math dictates you need institutional-grade custody, estate structuring, and direct market access. Because if your trade sizes are this large and your execution is sloppy, you're going to bleed thousands of dollars in slippage.
But here is the ultimate paradox of Level 8. The system gives you wildly better tools for being right, flawless execution, elite analysis, tax pros, but the system's limitations remain absolute. It cannot protect you from being wrong. $1 million parked in the wrong asset, held purely out of stubbornness, is still a catastrophic loss. The ultimate judgment call is still entirely on you.
So, we land on this, because this whole journey, from that $20 app deposit all the way to $1 million institutional account, it isn't actually a story about money at all. It's about whether you've been in the market long enough to recognize its relentless patterns. At level 1, you were terrified of uncertainty. At level 8, you haven't defeated it, but you've learned to live within it. So I'll leave you with this. As you look at your own portfolio today, are you just chasing numbers, or are you ready to develop a true relationship with uncertainty? Think about that before you make your next trade.